Hello and welcome to today's video where I will be talking about the interesting things I found out about mainly 1960s Doctor Who. Basically, the first interesting thing I found out was the three instances of references to climate change. The first example being in the Dalek Master Plan, episode 6, the big, broad, like 12 episodes long story basically about the Daleks. But this bit at the end of episode 6 is the most interesting part because the Doctor says to his two companions, who are from the far future and believably with oxygen rich atmospheres where they live and all that stuff, and it says here, and this is the quote from the Doctor, if either one of you went outside, it would be extremely dangerous. The whole atmosphere is entirely poisonous. I can't read. But that's the interesting fact about it, as it then says, underneath in brackets, in fact, the poisonous atmosphere is no more than 1960s urban pollution. Now, understandably, this is not the first ever instance of the BBC ever addressing anything to do with environment and issues and stuff, as with the Daleks, with the kind of inspiration of the fear of, with the Cold War, of nuclear war and chemical warfare, is seen there. But with this is directly talking about like air pollution. 1960. This is, and understandably, that this is a sci-fi series taking from real science of the time, exploring possibilities and all that stuff, with talking about these real events, and basically stating that these two companions from the far future with oxygen rich atmospheres are at risk, in 1960s, at risk of, being poisoned and stuff. Nowadays it would be much worse. They would probably die on the spot. But on that sense of the fact that the second with the two quotes, is in the Ice Warriors, the first episode. To explain the Ice Warriors, far future, glaciers from the North and South Pole have basically grown over time to reach basically the equator, where this is set in an African control center, basically where they are monitoring the glacial growth and trying to stop it from growing even more and trying melting it with an ionization ray. But the Doctor's put to a test, as he earlier in the episode is exclaiming about how he knows all this stuff and he knows what's going on, but he needs to know what is going on with the glaciers. So he's put to a test, and he's deducting all these different ways that it could have happened. It finally comes to a point where he explains that, well, in that case, the answer is simple. A severe drop in the carbon dioxide level in the Earth's lower atmosphere. Basically, it is explained, and the next quote is kind of confusing, and I will try and elaborate the confusion. Not elaborate, but help with the confusion. It's explained that over the years they had been creating artificial plants to create food, and probably sort of like an oxygen factory sort of situation where they're creating like a natural but artificial way of creating oxygen to help them sustain themselves. But the confusing part is with the next quote from the Doctor saying, no plants, no carbon dioxide. As we understand it, plants take in carbon dioxide and that's our oxygen. But what I think is happening is that because plants weren't naturally being planted, they weren't taking in the carbon dioxide at a natural rate. I believe that the scientists of the time were taking in the carbon dioxide in a big go to sustain the demand for the plants and food of the time. So they've taken in all the carbon dioxide, there's no heat being retained, and there's nothing producing the carbon dioxide, as this is like the far future, so I'm pretty sure they have found a way to become carbon neutral, so nothing's producing any carbon, and now the Earth has basically nothing to retain heat in, and it's now basically turning into a snowball in space. Now the next instance of this, I am not making this up. This was an actual official Doctor Who episode. Fury from the Deep is about, and it's set in a gas refinery and on gas drilling rigs, taking natural gas from the Earth in the North Sea, Britain's biggest industry, still kind of is, I believe, and it's being attacked by a seaweed creature that naturally would be consuming that natural gas. It's now attacking human infrastructure. Nature is fighting back. Now, this isn't just like some random bit of nature. This is quoted later on in the series of a primeval creature. So, a creature back in the Jurassic era. Like, it's been around since the Jurassic era, even probably before that. And it's attacking human infrastructure that's taking a natural resource that it needs to survive. It then takes over a bunch of humans to get what they want. They transmit the parasite sort of thing to each other by the natural gas, and basically how it's resolved is high frequency waves from the Doctor's companion Victoria. Yes, her scream stops the seaweed from reproducing, and then once the seaweed creature is dead and the hive mind is dead, everyone returns back to normal. But that was an official Doctor Who episode, an official one. And talking about Fury from the Deep, it is still actually classified as a missing story. And the missing stories, a lot of them are still missing, but there is a way until this year where the company making the animations, the way that they were recreating these stories, said that they were no longer doing it, and for the foreseeable future, every Whovian, a fan of Doctor Who, doesn't know whether we are going to get any more animations or reconstructions of these stories. And I thought, well, if that's the case, why doesn't the BBC just release the photographic reconstructions of the Doctor Who episodes? Because whenever there's an animation, they always include the photographic reconstructions on the disc, and I thought, well, why not release them? But it's understandable, not many people are going to watch a bunch of stills and listen to the audio, but the fact is that the audio still exists. There are master audios, but not a lot of reconstructed clips. But there is another way we could do it. Recreate the episodes. But there's a risk to that. You don't want to be too damaging to the audience, because you got to be accurate, but you also got to be safe with it, because you don't want to upset your audience. Now, it can be done. You could listen to the audio, listen to how it's all done, watch the stills and watch the photographs of these episodes and see how it's all done, try and get to understanding it all, and you can probably do it. But it's a lot of time and money they would have to be investing in this. And I understand that with the animations that was the same thing, and probably the reason why they stopped was because there wasn't a lot of funding for it. But I believe if they did like quite a few of the episodes, like the historical ones that are still missing, even though externally not many people would buy those historical story animations, but the fans will still buy them. There will still be an influx of fans buying those stories. But there you go. That was just a video of me talking about the interesting things I found out about 1960s Doctor Who.